So how long have you known the couple?
Well, I've known Sarah and Suzanne for about as long as I've been in Austin. So it's in excess of 20 years.
So how long have they attended services at CBI?
Well, you have to remember that I'm just a member of CBI, and before I started my website, everybodyneedsarabbi.com, I was the rabbi of a congregation called Halev for 12 years. Before that, I was the Hillel director at UT for 10 years. So for 22 years, I was attending services somewhere else. So I have no real idea how often and how long they've been going to services. But they're very dedicated members. I know that they're very involved in a variety of different ways in the congregation.
So what is your involvement in CBI? I mean, from what I heard there, you teach a class, and what things do you know that they're involved in over there?
Well, mostly at CBI, I'm a Jew in the pew. I'm just a member. They do ask me once in a while to teach Torah study on Saturday mornings. And I have my own Torah study class, which I started when I was at Kol Halev, which has been meeting now for, I don't know, between 15 and 20 years, every Thursday. And CBI has very generously allowed me to use one of their spaces to hold the class in. But that's not an official activity of the congregation. The congregation, though, is active in a lot of different areas. They have a full range of adult education classes. They're very involved in social action pursuits, particularly of late environmental matters. And they have an active religious school and Sunday school and all the usual kinds of things. So it's a pretty good congregation, active in a lot of ways.
So, the couple, I think you said that they're involved in a lot of environmental activity and...
Well, the congregation is.
Oh, the congregation?
Yeah, I don't know particularly if Suzanne and Sarah are involved in that. Both of them are heavily involved in Democratic Party politics. And that's not an official activity of the congregation, but there probably are plenty of people in the congregation who are similarly involved and who support that kind of thing.
And as far as, I would say, were they a couple when you first started attending services there?
Oh yeah, they've been a couple for more than 30 years.
Interesting. And as far as, I know both are lawyers.
Yeah.
And they're both actually involved in activities. These, do you know if they've done any pro bono work?
Well, I assume they have. I mean, all lawyers do some pro bono work. But Suzanne is involved mostly in adoption law. And I'm sure that there are some couples, or even individuals for that matter, who get some reduced kind of fee or whatever from Suzanne. Sarah works for the state of Texas, so fees don't come into the calculation there.
And as far as the adoption law is concerned, I believe their daughter was adopted. How long have you known her, and do you know when they adopted her?
Well, they've adopted two young ladies from China, as my daughter is also adopted a girl from China. And I've known both Dawn and Ting for all their lives.
Interesting. So did they adopt them around when they were in their infancy?
Yeah, they're very young. Yeah.
So how is their daughter, and how does she fit in with their family? Is it good?
Well, as far as I can tell, they get along great. I mean, I'm not on the inside.
Oh yeah, true.
And I'm sure that when you're dealing with teenage girls, whether they're adopted or not, there are certain challenges involved. But it seems to me that both Dawn and Ting are very well-grounded young ladies, and very, very high achieving and very positive kids.
That's good.
Yeah.
So what has been your involvement in the LGBT community, and how long?
Well, it's kind of grown over the years. When I was Hillel director at UT, I was involved in the founding of a group called Keshet, which is the Jewish LGBT organization at UT, but also on other campuses as well. So I've been involved in that kind of institutional work in the LGBT community for a while. I've also, this is not the first time I've been involved in marriage for a same-sex couple. At Kol Halev, of course, marriage is not a possibility, but I did a commitment ceremony for two members of the congregation who were gay, and that was an interesting experience as well. I would have done a marriage had it been possible, but it was not possible. But we did a full wedding ceremony within the Jewish tradition. This was not recognized by the state. So I've been involved in that way as well. But of course, the activity that I've in the LGBT community has ramped up considerably for me since I did Suzanne and Sarah's wedding. I'm kind of, the rabbi who did the same-sex wedding for a lot of people. So, that's been a kind of an interesting development in my career.
So how did you get involved in doing their ceremony, and what spurred on the decision to do it, and the environment surrounding that?
Well, I knew for a considerable amount of time that Suzanne and Sarah were intending to get married in Texas. They were looking for a way to do that, and it's not a new interest on their part. They have been trying for the last 8 or 9 years to get that accomplished, and just hasn't been able to. They weren't able to do it. I knew for the last couple of years that they wanted me to do the ceremony when and if an opportunity arose. So I've always been prepared to do that, during that time. I'm not sure exactly why they asked me to do it and not one of the other rabbis in town. I know that it's certainly easier for me to take that kind of position because now that I have a website that I work through and I don't have a congregation, I don't have a board to be responsible to, So I don't know that Steve Fulberg or Alan Friedman would be more personally or professionally willing to help or less willing is what I'm going to say, than I am, but they are constrained by their congregations to a certain degree. So maybe that's why Suzanne and Sarah asked me. And also it's the case that we've been just friends for a long time, so that's probably part of it as well. I mean, I guess I would say that this probably cuts down my credibility in the LGBT community, but the truth is that for me, this was first and foremost a pastoral concern. These were Jewish people who, in my view, had an interest and a right to have this kind of ceremony, and I wanted to do that for them as a way of being rabbinically supportive. I was less concerned, not unconcerned, but only secondarily concerned with making a political point in terms of the state of Texas and Travis County. I was happy to be in a position to make that point. Don't misunderstand me, but it was not my first motivation. Knowing Sarah and Suzanne as I do, and knowing their relationship and their situation and so forth, I certainly wanted them to have the blessings of marriage that was recognized, just on a personal level, as well as for anything else.
I know one of them has cancer. How long has that been going on, and when did you first hear about that?
Well, that's Sarah, and she was diagnosed about a year ago. I think that's correct. You'd have to check me on the date. But it's been a while. she's gone through various kinds of treatment, and that was part of the calculation, to be sure, but not really the prime motivation for me. I would have done the same thing even if there had not been a question of illness on the part of either one of them. It just seems to me to be the right thing to do, both Jewishly and as an American citizen. So even if they both been in tip-top health, I would have done exactly the same thing. Well, first of all, from the point of view of the rabbinic texts and from the point of view of Jewish history, the issue of inclusivity is a major concern in the Jewish community. In fact, in my Torah study class today, we were just talking about this in a different context, but the same idea. As Jews in our history, we've experienced exclusion on a number of different occasions and different epochs, and for no better reason than we were Jews. Whether you're starting with the enslavement in Egypt or talking about the Holocaust 2 millennia later. There's the most, I would say one of the most repeated phrases in the Torah is you do this commandment, whatever it happens to be, because you know the heart of the stranger, you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So the idea of not treating people as aliens, not as putting them outside the community, is very important in the Jewish historical context, but also in the context of what Jews think a community is. You have to do a lot to somehow get drummed out of the core in Judaism. Basically, once you're a Jew, you're a Jew, whatever else you do. And so the idea that somehow you would lose your standing if you are gay or lesbian or what have you is something that doesn't make a lot of sense within the Jewish context. It's also interesting to note that the rabbinic attitude about homosexuality in particular, there's very little said about lesbianism, but about homosexuality is basically we don't pay attention to that. That's as may be. Somebody may be homosexual, may be gay, whatever, and we don't. It's not a matter of concern. It should not be a matter of concern. We just consign that distinction to the margins, and what I mean is in terms of saying that is not a relevant concern in terms of your status as a Jew and so on and so forth. So for those reasons, the attitude of Judaism is much more inclusive. The idea of community in Judaism is very broadly understood. What I mean is, when the Jews left Egypt, it wasn't just the Jewish people, the Hebrew people who left. Along with them came a group called the Asaf Suf, which is an onomatopoeic word meaning the, sort of the, I don't know how to say, what's the word? The flotsam and jetsam of the community, Basically, there are all these people who are ragtag, that would be a better term. This ragtag group of people who took advantage of the Israelites leaving Egypt to go along with them to be able to have freedom. And who were, as a separate group, they disappeared. They became integrated in the Jewish people, and they no longer referred to as any kind of separate entity, except in the actual process of who goes out with the Israelites, which is a huge model for what you do with people who are different in whatever way. We don't know what made the Asasuf, this ragtag group, different from the Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ever specified what the difference was. Was it cultural? Was it physical? Was it biological? Who knows? It's not part of the text. It doesn't really matter. Whatever it was that made them different, they became part of the Jewish community and were included. So from my point of view, the Jewish model is to include everybody, whatever the differences are.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, I support, as a rabbi, same-sex marriages. And the larger point is to the inclusion of people who are different, even though as part of the Jewish community. As an American, I don't see how you make the counter argument. You have an equal protection clause, et cetera, et cetera. The issue from the standpoint of American law is clear, in my view. And for that reason, I don't see how you can withhold the benefits of marriage from people, as long as they want to have a loving and stable relationship, on any kind of grounds other than whether or not they want to be married. You know, exactly what interest does the state have in saying that this group or that group cannot be married? Now, it's not so much the argument, you know, that people make is always the argument of inclusion. Well, if you let these people get married, then you have to let these people get married, and so on and so forth. That's not really the argument. The argument is, if you exclude these people from the benefits of marriage, who else are you allowed to exclude?
Mm-hmm.
Where does it stop when you, if you say that same-sex marriage is not possible? Well, when does it become possible to eliminate interracial marriage or interreligious marriage or whatever? On what grounds do you say no to those? I mean, the argument cuts the other direction, it seems to me. So I say that as an American citizen, but as a Jew and as a rabbi also, I have a responsibility to support this policy of having same-sex marriage.
I mean, it makes sense. I think a lot of the control over that issue, I mean, in Texas, probably has to do with dominionism and that.
Well, I'm not sure I know what you mean by dominionism.
Dominionism, well, and like fundamentalists, like Christianity. Dominionism is they believe that Christians should be the head of the country, and it's their sole goal to try to.
Well, that's a certain segment.
That's what I said. Dominionism.
Yeah. Well, most Christians don't hold that position. Some do, but I think the some who do would differ from me on most every issue I could think of, mm-hmm. Not just that one. Yeah. I mean, look, there's a certain rhetorical value that people place on making statements like, this is a Christian country, and so on and so forth. And it's a way of rallying certain troops. But the people who are really willing to act on that, fortunately, are few and far between. And most people recognize that that is not a possible grounds on which to have a democratic and pluralistic country, which is what we have, whether those folks or anybody else like it or not. That's just a fact.
Yeah, no, that's not all. A lot of Christians don't. That's why you make sure you distinguish dominionism, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah. To
really narrow it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
But it's so is this the first wedding you've done, or have you done them in the past?
Weddings in general?
For weddings or within the...
I've done weddings for more than 30 years. I was ordained in 1977, and every year I've done weddings. So I don't know what the total is, but it's a lot. Was
there anything different between this wedding and other weddings?
Well, sure. First of all, of course, obviously the political context made it different. But on a more pedestrian level, we were standing out to the side of Airport Boulevard in front of the Travis County office sign. I've done outdoor weddings before, but usually they're in beautiful venues outside of a nice hotel or at a resort or the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center or a park, not in front of a big office building, in front of a kind of industrial sort of sign. But the setting was absolutely appropriate given the circumstances and given the role that was played by the Travis County Clerk's office in the ceremony.
And you mentioned the county clerk's office.
Yeah.
So how was the wedding able to push through the clerk's office and tell them a little about the obstacles you and the couple encountered on the way?
Well, frankly, I didn't encounter any obstacles. When I involved myself, or was involved in the process, was kind of late in the process from a political point of view. The judges involved had already decided at that point to issue the marriage license. That's when my involvement became active, and I was no longer just waiting on the sidelines for something to happen. So at that point, the principals involved were already on board, and there was some waiting because you got to have the court issue the license, it has to be taken over to the county clerk's office and so forth. But none of that was really an obstacle. It was just time. But that doesn't mean that Sarah and Suzanne didn't find obstacles. They certainly did. This was the result of 8 years of effort on their part. For them, there were lots of obstacles at one time or another. Finding a climate in which it was possible that a judge would issue the license took a long time in and of itself until the case was brought to, I'm going to forget his name now, the surviving surviving partner in a same-sex relationship was able to inherit from the estate of her partner. Once that took place, then it became possible for the local judge here in Travis County to make a ruling that the prohibition of same-sex marriages in the state constitution was unconstitutional, and therefore to issue a license. Those are factors that were not entirely in the control of anybody in this process, but without them, nothing was going to happen. So there's a variety of factors, some of which were managed or driven by Sarah and Suzanne, and some of which simply were not. They were just the changing constellation of factors which surrounded their efforts to be married.
Well, you say the surrounding factors, and you said their efforts, and what also got them to choose this judge, and how did they meet this judge, and how did this judge come on board?
Well, I think a lot of people were interested in whether or not same-sex marriage could be performed. It wasn't only Sarah and Suzanne who were interested in that. There were a lot of people who support that policy, who were looking for an occasion in which it could be done. So, and many of these were people involved in the Democratic Party politics, or they were involved in the legal profession, and were, attuned to finding the right circumstances and being aware of them when they would emerge. So I think in that sense there was those were some of the factors. And that Suzanne and Sarah knew a lot of these people was a function, frankly, of their involvement in Democratic Party politics. They knew that there were people around who had a sympathetic attitude.
When you say the circumstances were just right, what made it, like, these circumstances just right? Was it her having cancer, or what were the real...
Well, it's hard to know what the motivation of the judge was in issuing the license. What he said was that he viewed the Texas Constitution's position here as incorrect, that it was constitutionally incorrect. And he also said he had sympathy for the couple because of Sarah's medical condition. But unless there was the former, unless there was a problem with the constitutionality of the state constitution, I don't think that the judge would have issued the license, no matter how ill Sarah was, no matter how sympathetic he would have been about the illness. That he took it into consideration, I'm sure, is true. But without the other condition, nothing, I think, would have happened. Is frankly how I look at it. I think, who knows? I mean, these are politically savvy people who know a lot about politics, more about politics than I do. But if I was going to make an argument for why, as a judge in Travis County, I would issue such a license, the two things that I would play up would be the issue of constitutionality of the ban, and compassion for the couple because of Sarah's medical condition. It seems to be just a reasonable position legally and emotionally.
I know, like, right after they were issued the license, there was efforts to try to put in legislation to try to block everybody else.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, you have to ask Governor Abbott and the Attorney General about that, Mr. Paxson. I mean, these are people who campaigned on an opposition to what they call a homosexual agenda. And for a political reason, they have to keep up their bona fides in the eyes of their constituency. Whether they, I mean, I think they probably legitimately think it's wrong. I'm not saying that they're being entirely cynical, but I do think they're politicians, and that it would not, even though maybe what was done was not something they could really reverse, they had to try to, in order to maintain their bona fides with the folks who are their political backbone. I don't think that any politician would do that. Did they secretly really think it was okay and they only did it for political reasons? I don't think that's true. I think that in their heart of hearts they think it's wrong. I think in their heart of hearts they don't approve of such people and such relationships. So I think they did what they thought they had to do on a personal level and on a political level, which was to try to quash this seeming chink in the constitutional armor forbidding same-sex marriages. Whether they'll be successful or not, we'll see later in the summer after the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, rules on some of the issues that are before it right now.
Did the couple have any reaction to that as far as the effort to quash it, or did they have any obstacles after they...
Well, I think they were not happy with it.
Oh, yeah, true.
I mean, look, I'm sure that if you are Suzanne and Sarah, you have encountered pushback about your relationship from the get-go. I can't imagine that they have not encountered some kind of opposition, disapproval, reluctance, discomfort, whatever it may be. Even from some people who support what they do, because not everybody is equally comfortable with same-sex marriage. Even though they may agree that it's the right thing to do, they're not always 100% comfortable with it. So opposition of one sort or another, or static, one way or another, is, I'm sure, something that they are familiar with. At the same time, the fact that the governor of the state and the attorney general of the state and some of the Tea Party types in the legislature came at them with really some considerable vengeance. I don't know if they exactly were surprised by that, but I think they were a little shocked and appalled at the vitriolic statements that were made by some people. Having said that, that's what politics is, and this is a political issue. Whatever else you may think of it as, it's a religious issue, it's a spiritual issue, it's a communal issue, all sorts of ways you can look at it, but it is a political issue without question. And politics can be rough and tumble, and it was in this case, and it will continue to be.
So they had good luck trying to keep the license and getting it.
Oh, as far as I know, yeah. I mean, that seemed not to have been reversed, and there are a lot of people who have expressed their support. It's really fascinating to look at people's reactions to this, because frankly, I would have expected more pushback than there actually has been. I'll give you an example. I think I may have mentioned that I have a little part-time congregation in College Station, which is not the Hillel that serves the university, but it's a separate congregation that serves the Jewish community of Bryan College Station. Most of these people are members of the Texas A&M community. They teach at A&M, they are on the staff, and so on and so forth. So that's actually a more liberal constituency than you might think. The town of College Station is pretty conservative in general. One weekend I was out there after the wedding took place. I was checking out of the hotel, and I went up to the front desk to check out because I had a little bit of a question about the bill. And there were two people at the front desk. One, one of the sort of general people who work there with little vests, with little name tag and so forth, clearly, dressed in the uniform of the hotel, a young man, and a little older woman who was dressed in more sort of civvies. And I had met her before. She's the assistant manager at the hotel. So as I was checking out, the guy looks at me and he says, "I know you." And I said, "Well, I don't think we've met before." He said, No, it's not here at the hotel, because I'm new here at the hotel. But I've seen you somewhere. I said, "Well, maybe you saw my picture on the front page of the Houston Chronicle." I was just on the Houston Chronicle. He said, "Oh, that's right. You're the rabbi." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "That I'm homosexual. That's," or he said, "I'm gay. That's terrific." And then the woman next to him, his boss, says, "Well, I'm heterosexual, and I think it's terrific."
That's really good.
That was really kind of amazing, not what I would have expected necessarily. So there's a lot of people out there who appreciate not just what I did, but what occurred. And I don't know if they necessarily vote Republican or Democratic or not, but whichever party they belong to, they see the reasonableness of this position. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to see, and the fact that they were so sort of overjoyed about it was kind of a surprise to me.
I just need to stop this real quick because my temperature